us all energized because some of you guys might be like, well, maybe you're starting to ready to give up, or I've been doing this so long, and why am I still fighting? Why aren't other people stepping up to the plate? So I thought I'd start with a little bit of inspiration because I sometimes get down too. My husband sometimes says, why don't you step down? We have 6 kids. There's not too many people who, are moms that have 6 kids who are like running around doing this stuff. So but the other day, a few weeks ago, I went to an event and a man stopped me and he said, "Thank you so much for what you're doing." He said, "I wish I could write you a huge check."
Right.
And I said, "Oh, why?" And he shared with me how years ago he met somebody who was about to commit suicide. So it was the middle of the night and they heard yelling outside. So they go to the window and somebody's yelling at them, "Help, help." So he opens the curtains and he says, "Step into the light. I can't see you." So that man steps into the light and he says, "I'm Mark. And can I please talk to somebody? Because I'm thinking of committing suicide." So they let the man in and they have coffee together in the middle of the night. And he shares how many, many years ago his girlfriend had an abortion. And all these years he was traumatized and troubled, and his mental
Toxic.
illness got worse and worse. And so finally, he was at the point where he didn't want to live anymore. So they managed to talk him through it, and just sharing his story is already really healing. If any of you have been through something, you know that journaling, sharing, a bit of the load goes away. And so what had happened to him was his girlfriend wanted an abortion. And so, of course, he tried everything he could. He's like, "I'll take care of the baby. I'll do everything. I'll do all the caretaking." But she just didn't want any of it. So it was time for the abortion, and finally he was like so desperate. He's like, "Please, can I just do one more thing? I have 75 cents left in my pocket. Can I please make some phone calls at the payphone?" So he had 3 chances. He had 25 cents, 3 times he could try to call somebody. So he called the first doctor and they didn't pick up. He called the second doctor's office and they were too busy. Then he called the third doctor's office and they're like, "We can't help you," but they directed him to another clinic or another office, but he had no more money. So he was just devastated and he was like so dejected. So there was nothing left for him to do. So his girlfriend went ahead and had the abortion. And all these years he'd been struggling and traumatized. So when I do my presentations in churches and in schools, I try to tell them, you might think this solves the problem for you, but the grief spreads. It spreads to the doctors, to the nurses, and to the dad, to the grandparents, to anybody who's involved. And so that just really gave me encouragement. The man really encouraged me to just keep on going. You never know who you help out. And sometimes we don't get to hear about it. Sometimes, it's our billboard along the side of the highway and somebody sees it and never tells us. So I like to encourage you guys to keep on going because we're saving people from pain and suffering. And this grief is not like the normal grief of a normal death, right? It's a very complicated, unnatural type of grief. Okay, so let's start talking about churches. Are there any questions right now, or you need something? Maybe raise your hand, and hopefully Monica or I will see it, or write in the chat box. So I just want to talk about that we need to preach to the choir because when I talk to pastors, they often will say like, well, we're pro-life or we're Christians, or sometimes people don't think that we need to be preaching to the choir. But as you see in my slides here, 70% of women who have an abortion identify as Christians. So there are, abortion is happening in general in the church as much as outside of the church. I know there's some churches that are, stricter and they have lower abortions, but in general, on the average. And according to 40% or more of these women who have an abortion, they went to church in the last month. So, these are not atheists or agnostics or, they never go to church. A lot of people have an abortion in the church. So we need to keep on reaching out to them. And as you know, pastors are often afraid to talk about it. Now, some pastors, they do talk about it and they're not afraid, but maybe just like me, you guys hear about, well, it's a political issue, like I don't deal with politics. And I'd like to argue, it's not a political issue. it's a moral issue. It's a biblical issue. It's one of the 10 commandments, you know, it's a spiritual issue. So this is one of the reasons why we need to deal with churches. And the other reason, of course, is because we need their support. So we'll talk about that in a minute. You know, there's a huge group of people in the church. All the pastor has to do is send one mass email, and everybody gets the information about our dinner or whatever event we have. So I would say a church is a really good place to start with, or a school. So this is a list of some of our successes. We work with about 30 to 40 churches. I believe in Chilliwack we have around 100 churches or so, so I have a long ways to go. Now, these are not, you know, all 100% successes. So, for example, Southside, they work with us every month. They give us backpacks that are filled with diapers and all kinds of stuff, and we can give them to our women. They support us on a month-by-month basis. Then there's a church like Main Street. We get to do our events there for free. So we just had a dinner with 400 people. So that saves us a lot of money. Some years we've had to rent halls, and it's just saved us a lot of money because they have like amazing equipment. Then there's something like, you know, the Cornerstone. He was very pro-life, the pastor, or he is very pro-life. I built a connection with him because he has a Down syndrome child. So I was, you know, quite excited in the beginning. We get to use their space, like when we do volunteer training and stuff like that. But I haven't really gone further in terms of, I haven't been able to do a presentation in their church. And I don't think there's too many of their church people like coming to our walk or to our dinner. So all different stages, you know, some of them are totally involved and they write us big checks of, you know, $10,000, $20,000. And some of them, you know, say they are pro-life, but you never see them. So yeah, I have a list of different things. And I would say that the Dutch Reformed and the Catholics, those are a good place to start with because, you know, they're more likely to be pro-life. And some of the other churches too, like sometimes there's a Baptist church or something. It depends a lot on the pastor and the leadership. But sometimes, you know, the pastor might not be very pro-life or you don't know where he stands, but maybe there's somebody in the church that's quite pro-life that you can work with. And they can invite their friend who can invite their friend. So you don't always have to work with the pastor. Can you guys all hear me at this point? Does it sound good, Monica? Yeah?
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay. So I talked about involving churches for, you know, we need to preach the choir. And then also because it's a big group, it's the most efficient way of working. They can become your members, your donors, your volunteers. We need new board members. So I suggest it's a little different topic, but try to think of succession planning so you have younger board members in there, you know, not just, you know, 70-year-olds and then there's like somebody who's 25. You can have somebody in each stage and age, just so that's a little easier, you know, as people grow older or people move away. You know, they come to your events. Obviously, if you're having a walk with 10 people, it doesn't look near as effective if you have a walk with 500 people. You need the bodies and you need the moral support. We had a parade that went wrong. We handed out, I don't know if you guys seen it in the news, before COVID, like 5 years ago, maybe 2019 or 18, we had little fetal models that we handed out in the parade with candies, and it was all over global news. And you know, we really could use the moral support at that time of churches and of other pro-life organizations who stuck with us because we had to close our office and we were getting death threats and people were really unhappy because they thought seeing a little baby model, you know, it wasn't gory. My kids play with it, but some people thought that was very scary, even though it was Halloween time and there was all the Halloween stuff out. So we need that moral support, right? Like, you know, for sending letters to the government or whatever. And then also simple little things like providing space, you know, or sometimes you can, you know, rent chairs, borrow chairs from them or whatever. And like I said, they need our help. So church is a pretty important, pretty big deal because you know, they're Christians and there's a good chance there are pro-lifers in that group rather than working with, you know, I don't know, a group like maybe, I don't know, TOPS or some other kind of group. I don't know, Kiwanis Club or something. Of course, you're not going to have as many Christians in there. So I would make a suggestion. You can make this as fancy as you want. If you have more staff or more time, you can get totally into it. or you can do it just simply and just go tomorrow and visit a church. But I'm going to give you a few details. So if you want to, get more detailed, you can. So I would say maybe start with a goal, because if you don't have a goal in mind, it's probably not going to happen. So maybe you want to, be easy on yourself and say, I'm going to do one church this month. Maybe you're more gung-ho after my talk and you're like, I'm going to do one church per week for the next month. Or I've done it before in blitzes, suddenly you get energized because some pastor is really nice to me. And I'm like, oh boy, I'm going. And suddenly I go to a whole bunch of churches in a row. But then, if you have one bad moment or situation in between there, you kind of get depressed and like, okay, sometimes it kind of, you get busy with your walk or your dinner or whatever, and, you'll move on to something else. But try to set a goal. And we'll talk about SMART goals in a minute. I would also suggest for item number 2 that you make a church spreadsheet, so where you can put all your information on there. And I'll give you an example of that. I don't know if any of this information is like useful at all, or if you think like, wow, this is common sense, but hopefully it helps somebody. I would also suggest that if you are doing a visit or making a phone call, do it in the morning. I've gone to different conferences, business conferences and stuff, and studies show that you have the greatest amount of willpower in the morning. If you do it in the afternoon, you're going to procrastinate. You're going to say, I'm too tired. I don't dare. I don't have the courage. So try to do one hard thing in the morning. So I encourage you to contact a church in the morning. And then how I do it is I give options. I like to go to their church to visit them, because then I can see them in the context. Hopefully I get to meet another pastor. I get to meet the secretary. I can build some connections. But sometimes, they're not comfortable with that, or they work out of their house. You can meet in a coffee shop, or you can meet at your pro-life office. Now, I don't know how many of you have clients coming in, like you have a women's center or anything like that. But
Can I have a question,
yeah,
Marion? Do you go by yourself or do you go with somebody else?
Oh, that is a very good question. Now, I know Mike Pence, the former vice president of the United States, he always took his wife along or somebody along, when he was visiting another lady, but that's a different topic. I usually go by myself just for logistics. If we had 50 people on our staff, if I had volunteers just waiting around all day to hang around with me, I would take somebody else, but I usually go by myself just because it's just so much more organization, trying to schedule another person in. But, like ideally, I guess you would go with somebody else, because then, like if you're meeting a female pastor, male pastor, they hear from 2 different perspectives, from an older person, from a younger person. I mean, it's ideal, but I don't know how reasonable it is to always take somebody along. Yeah, and our pro-life office is busy with clients, so they usually can't come unless it's at night. We do an office tour, and then pastors can come at night. So you're gonna have to think about, what you might take along. So I personally think it's important to take something along. Your presence is the most important, but I feel like, if they didn't connect with me, maybe, a year later, their secretary will look at their pen and say like, oh, who's this group? Or, they'll be reminded in a month later and be like, what's this pamphlet laying on my stack of papers? So taking something along, it's just kind of like your advertising, giving a newsletter, a book, but make sure you put your stamp or your logo or contact information in there, and then hopefully they can then pass it around. And also you need to think of what in terms to say, but I'll talk about that on another slide. Then in terms of who, talk to a pastor or other church leader. Now, often, like if it's a big church, the head pastor doesn't have time. Any church leader, any priest, any elder will do, even the secretary. And you know what? Maybe they're too busy. Maybe, you talk to your neighbor, and your neighbor is going to Mennonite Brethren Church. You might want to start with your neighbor. That's okay. Sometimes it's better starting lower on the rung, because sometimes if you start on the top of the rung, and if the head pastor or the church council says no, then it's really awkward to go lower and talk to other people. So sometimes I find, I talk to people, just members, lay members, and, and they're interested, and then it slowly grows organically by that. But ideally, I do have a goal to meet at least one pastor in each church, and ideally every single pastor eventually. But this is like a lifelong project, right? You need to keep on renewing and rejuvenating as pastors move on and pass away and churches change and merge. So then in terms of how, I've done it all kinds of ways. I'm not an expert, I haven't taken a degree in this. It kind of depends on my mood, or how I talk to myself in my head. You can start with, you can do emails. That's kind of lower level entry. It's not as scary as dropping in. You can do a phone call. Sometimes that gets a little awkward because you can't see them. Or you can do a drop in. You can either drop in unexpectedly, like say you want to bring a book or your latest newsletter. Maybe the pastor will be there, maybe not. Or you can actually, email first or call the secretary and make an appointment. So I do it different ways. It kind of depends on the situation. I would say, ideally, if you've emailed the first time, you always try to meet them face to face sometime, a few months later, half a year later. Or if you've met them in person, try to become friends on Facebook or try to send them an email sometime. Try to have different points of contact. Yeah, so that's kind of some of the things on my plan. Does anybody want to share anything, any thoughts so far?
It's Carol.
Yeah.
The youth leaders are also good ones to contact, particularly if you do have a program that you could present to the youth or, have an opportunity.
Very good point. Very good point. I should have put that on there, youth leaders. So we just had the Alliance Church in Chilliwack. So we've been working with their church a whole bunch of years, but I wasn't really getting any further. I did a few small presentations. We have our walk there every year. We've done a movie screening, Row Canada. But then suddenly one day I had the brainwave. I'm like, oh, maybe I should try the youth pastor. And so I had a visit. And then in November, he came with his youth group, and it was really awesome. We had a fire pit outside because we have a little bit of concrete area, and they did an office tour. They toured our van, and I did a little 15-minute presentation, and then they did a service project. So a good way to get a youth group involved, because a lot of youth groups like doing service projects. Their pastors like doing that. So if you can't get in, by doing a presentation or by inviting people to a walk, a low level entry thing is to say, hey, would your youth group be interested in doing a service project for, single moms or for the elderly or whatever kind of, whoever you want. Excellent. Thank you. Was there any other thoughts or ideas? Okay. I don't see any, I guess. So then I'll go to the next one. Maybe I'm getting into too much detail, and this is my crazy teacher brain, but I've learned over the years it's important to set smart goals, because if you're like, yeah, I'm going to visit a church, I don't know, it half the time doesn't happen. So I would get specific, and I would say, write it down somewhere, because studies show you write it down, it's more likely to happen. I'm going to drop off newsletters at 4 churches this month. Have some kind of specific goal. Make sure it's measurable. Your friend or your president or whoever, your other board member, can check in with you on a month. Did you go to 5 churches? And of course, make it achievable. Don't raise the bar so high. Depressed and you're never gonna get there.
Your sound is going, Marion.
Be realistic. You don't have to get answers, and you just. Sorry?
Your sound is breaking up.
Monica, did you say something?
Yes, your sound.
Okay. Do I have to redo this?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I will walk to another room for a second. It's really weird. Hang on a second. I have to take my cord with me.
While you're walking, can I just take the interruption? You keep walking, but
yeah, okay.
I don't have my picture, but that's by choice because I had surgery and I'm looking like something out of Star Wars.
Okay.
And Marty Mackway was going to be with me, but she has a hearing problem, and for some reason I cannot get my volume level up. It's my end technically on the speaker, so she has
Okay.
left, and so it's only me. And while you're still playing with chords,
Yeah.
Marion, Shirley, I see the name Shirley Bosman, and I see two ladies, and I do know the lady on the left with the short hair that spoke so kindly about remembering me, but I'm not sure of the name. So could somebody help this old senior out and give me both ladies' names? Thank you.
This is Tonya
That's
Howell
another old senior.
and Gary Howell.
Yeah, say it again, sorry.
Tonya and Gary Howell.
Tanya.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Tonya.
It's Carol. You and I and others were on the BC Pro-Life Board.
Exactly. I recognize you so well, and I apologize for not having the name here.
The screen is small,
In the days of Hildegard Creek.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, thank you. Okay, sorry,
Carol.
Marion. I'll let you reconnect again.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Can I just say something, Carol?
Yes.
We are recording this, so we can send you the recording.
Oh, that would be great. Thank
And
you.
so, yeah, so your friend can, the other lady can listen then. Yeah.
Okay, because I was also going to ask, but you may have already said earlier, whether these screenshots with all the points are in printed form as well. But I did run and grab my camera, my phone, so I'm taking pictures of it, but that's okay.
I can email you the PowerPoint. I could possibly
But
print them off.
not if it makes work for you, because I will have it on my camera. I
Okay.
just didn't know if it was something you had that you could just click as an attachment and send to us or something.
Yeah, no, not yet, but
No,
I
not-
could send it.
Not to worry. I am definitely stopping talking now. Thank you.
Okay,
Go
yeah,
ahead,
that's fine.
Marion.
Monica, do you want me to redo this one?
No, you can go to just achievable, maybe.
Okay. Okay, so
Could I make, this is Rick Rutland, like just one suggestion. If everybody turns off the camera except for the presenter, you use much less bandwidth on the internet and it might work better for everybody.
okay.
You turn off your video.
You want to have pictures off?
Sure, then I'll keep going while you guys are doing that.
I don't know how to do that.
Well,
Okay,
I'm sure there's one other person, and at least I'm looking at somebody. Okay, so we'll go to make sure it's achievable. You have enough time. Some of you guys are burnt out. You've been doing this for years. Don't be hard on yourself. Maybe you need to get somebody younger involved or something like that. So make it achievable, realistic, one per week or one per month. And you need to set a time frame, because if you just say, sometime this year, it's just not going to happen. So have some time set to it. Okay, so the church spreadsheet I was talking about. Now my spreadsheet looks different than this. I have like, I don't know, 10 columns, but I just want to have a simple spreadsheet for all of you. So I do like, the pastor, the church, and then I'll often write some notes like, what kind of pastor is it? Is it the lead pastor, the men's pastor? Is it an elder? Is it, I don't know, your church liaison or something? And then you could have the different contact pieces of information, their phone number, email, whatever they have. And then some notes. I try to always write down notes, sometimes during the conversation, sometimes as soon as I get into my car, sometimes when I get back in the office or back home, because I'm trying to build relationships. So, maybe you want to write a note about how many congregants they have, or maybe that the pastor will say, well, I used to come to your walk, 10 years ago, or, they have a disabled child. Write down some points so that when you see them next time, you can say, how is your son Rory doing? It's just a point. It's kind of something that you learn in the business world as well. And then have a follow-up column, because once you've met somebody once, you're not done. Like, you're just starting. So, maybe something in their conversation, they're like, well, maybe you can send me the date to the March for Life in Victoria. So, you make sure you follow up with an email. Or maybe, 2-3 months go by and you're like, okay, I visited these 4 pastors. Now I should follow up with, an invitation to an office tour, or, I should send them my next newsletter or some kind of follow-up. And then you can just continue adding columns as you see them again or email them or so literally I sometimes do these things when I'm bored or when I'm supposed to be preparing a presentation. Suddenly I go on a sidetrack and I'm like, oh, let's see if there's more churches in town or who I haven't met. So then you can just start Googling churches. I found some like on Google, but I've also gone on my maps on my phone, from when I'm driving, and you type in churches in Chilliwack and you sometimes come up with different churches that are on the main Google list. You check websites. Sometimes, only the lead pastor is on there, but sometimes you can find out through a Facebook group or something, which other pastors there are. Phone book, possibly. There's some stuff in the phone book still. I love joining church groups via Facebook because that way, so this sounds a little bit creepy, but one thing I do is I join a church Facebook group and then I try to get to know some of the people on there. So I look at who are all the people commenting on that church Facebook group. Maybe it's like this lady called Mary and it looks like she's quite involved. So I try to become a Facebook friend with her, learn to get to know her. So say if you're not getting anywhere with the pastor or the priest, maybe you can, ask Mary for coffee and, maybe she's part of some women's group or something and you can get into the church that way. And then join a ministerial. Are any of you guys part of the ministerial?
I have a question for you, Marion.
Yeah, go ahead.
I asked our ministerial if I could make a 10-minute presentation. They turned me down. So they don't even want to talk to us.
Oh, that's very depressing. Thankfully,
I was
yeah, I can see that's very discouraging. So maybe next you have to see if you can try to, I don't know, work with a Catholic church or with a Dutch Reformed church, or I've even done a presentation. I don't know how you guys all feel about this, but for Action for Canada, a lot of the people from Action for Canada are quite pro-life. So, and sometimes some of them go to churches. So you do a presentation for Action for Canada, you get to know some of them, and then you can get into a church that way.
Yeah, no, the Dutch Reformed and Catholic are good, but the other ones aren't.
Yeah, okay, I know. It's sometimes a bit of a tough go. Sometimes what you can do, Dawn, is and get one of your Dutch pastors or your Catholic priest to connect you to another pastor. Maybe they know another pastor or they know a worship leader or the custodian in another church or whatever, any other kind of contact.
And maybe a sympathetic pastor will then make a presentation on pro-life to the ministerial.
Right. Yeah. So that's a very good point, Carol. So we just did our ministerial presentation. We get to do it every year. We're really lucky. They have the pastors on there, and then they have a few they work with 6 groups, and we are fortunately allowed to be one of the groups. And so we just made our presentation in January. And then often we'll just let the pastors talk as well. And they'll say, oh, we love this about you, or, oh, you came and did this for us. And so they kind of promote us in front of everybody else. It's not always that. It sounds wonderful, but it's not always that wonderful. Sometimes it's, disappointing because you think someone's going to connect with you the next week and it doesn't happen. But it's just kind of like if you're selling Tupperware, sometimes you go around the group and they can, share their stories of how they like Tupperware. So you can have the other pastors, share about, how they are involved in pro-life or whatever. So join the ministerial if you can. Okay, I'll just give you a little example of this Pentecostal assembly. So I just divided this into 2 sections, into the warm-up and then like an official kind of visit where you do kind of an ask or something. So with the warm-up, our president had invited her neighbor to come to the office tour. Now, I didn't know this lady was the pastor's wife. I kind of forgot I had seen her, but we just went to a ministerial a couple of months ago, and she was all excited seeing me, and I didn't even know her name anymore, and I didn't even know that the man, sitting beside her was a pastor. Anyways, at the end, I was talking to them. And, he said, if you ever need any space, you can, come, you can use it for free for whatever you needed. So she came to the office tour, and then we connected the ministerial. And then last week I went and checked out their space. He gave me a whole office tour, like of their whole church. And then I get to learn about him in the context. I got to see his wife. His wife was there too. But now I feel like, okay, so that's the start. But now I need to kind of do, a follow-up. Like I want to either get, like half of their church members to come to our walk, or I want to do a presentation in their church. So my homework for myself is that I need to actually go visit him, like, in a coffee shop or in the church, and like come with some prepared stuff. Like, there's a booklet on abortion conversations in the church, or, I need to educate him a little bit on some of the details and see how we can work together. They don't have our newsletters, so I need to bring them a whole stack of newsletters, and hopefully they can give their newsletters 4 times a year to their parishioners. So there's a next step. So that's my to-do list, the yellow stuff there. Okay, so what to say? Now, one thing I've learned in life is first connect and then direct. If any of you have, worked in business, or maybe you've done some work with CCBR, showing graphic images, I'm not sure if you agree with it or not, but first try to build some relationship. Don't right away, barge in with your passionate pro-life ideals, because it might scare them away. So kind of get to know them, professionally, personally, get to know their church a little bit. And you don't have to talk for an hour about that, but even just like, a couple minutes. Maybe you can, share a story about yourself, or, about your organization, or about something pro-life. They often connect with how many kids. Like I know a pastor, and they have the same amount of children as us in the same age range. It's kind of a connection that makes you feel like, okay, we're both have some common ground. We can work with each other. And I also find the power of appreciation is very, very powerful. So I used to be part of Toastmasters, and we did a talk on the power of appreciation. So try to thank the pastors for all that they do in the church. Maybe you notice something, you notice how they're so active with this or active with that. Build relationship, and try to somehow find out in the conversation where they stand. Are they 100% pro-life? Are they the mushy middle? Are they totally, like I know a lot of the, is it the Anglican churches, I guess? They're quite, pro-choice. So that helps, because if they're quite, they're not very pro-life, you first have to do some educating, and you have to take it slow, and you're not going to come in there and say, can you write out a $20,000 check? You need to kind of build relationship. So that was connecting. And then you try to direct. So sometimes connecting can take, you see them once, like, I don't know, you see them in the entrance of their church once, and you see them somewhere else. And then it takes a little while to connect. Sometimes you can connect way, way quicker. And then you can direct. So that's like, why you're actually there. It's, your ask. And you can talk to them about why you're there. So one thing you want to do is like share about your organization, maybe share about your role. Maybe you have a story about why you're so passionate. Maybe your teenage daughter had an abortion, or maybe your mom was almost coerced into getting euthanized or something like that, or have some story. Share about other churches you work with. So this morning I actually did a presentation for 5 different churches in Yarrow, which is a little part of Chilliwack, a little area of Chilliwack. And I found it really helped me to share, we do this with that church, that with that church, because sometimes they're kind of worried. They're like, are you guys safe? Are you guys a bunch of crazy screaming pro-lifers? What are you like? So it kind of helps them to know about, where we are in the community. And then lately, I've also framed it as, not what can you do for us, but what can we do for you? So I talk about, churches are such a big source of support for us. And so we'd like to give back to the community. So, and then I talk to them about some examples. Sometimes I give them 2 ideas. Sometimes I give them 5 ideas. It kind of depends on their personality, how much time you have. I'm always worried I overwhelm people, because I have a lot of ideas and I talk a lot. So You can talk to them about, doing presentation, maybe, the pastor's more interested with you, the movie. He doesn't have to be worried about what you're going to say, if you're going to be too harsh with, your abortion rhetoric. Can you guys all hear me still?
Yep.
Okay, because I just said internet unstable, but I'm closer to the router now, so I thought that should help. But youth education, like somebody mentioned, events, you can invite people to events. And then you want to have like some kind of, if you can in that conversation, have a concrete next step. But I'm not always comfortable. Like sometimes I'm like, okay, I just have to leave it at this. We've talked enough. I just have to wait till I email him in 3 weeks or in 2 months. But if there is opening, you could say, would there be somebody in your church who could be a church liaison? Because I don't want to bother you as a pastor or as a priest. I don't want to bother you all the time. But, maybe there's somebody in your church who you think would be suited to be the church liaison, because then you can, email back and forth with them, and then they can do things like distribute newsletters and post on their church Facebook group and stuff like that. Or you could, if you just have a brand new newsletter or something, you could say, hey, we'd love to. We distribute newsletters in 3 other churches. Would you like our newsletters as well? And then if it's yes, how many would you like? Do you need 20, 50? Whatever. Or you can invite them to an office tour. So we usually have mixed office tours where, it's people from all different churches and different, places in Chilliwack, but you could do an office tour specifically for that church, where the church is responsible of inviting, depending how big your office is, 15, 20, 25 people, and you have an office tour just for that church. Any questions right now? Not so far. Okay, some of this stuff I already said, but again, you can wing it, but I would prepare a little bit, maybe know some stats, like know that, 1 in 4 women, or even up to 1 in 3 women have an abortion in your area. Have some stories prepared, because stories make it real. With all the numbers, it kind of goes over their head, but if you have a story, they can attach themselves to that. So have a euthanasia story if that's what you focus on, or an abortion story, or like, for example, I just shared the story of we have an ultrasound machine with our Cherished Women's Pregnancy Center. So I just shared with a bunch of pastors how we were all sitting at a meeting and we just got a text came in from a teenager that said, I'm keeping my baby. And she had seen the ultrasound a few weeks ago, and we were all cheering. And so, it helps to have a few stories in your back pocket, and, make sure you know what you do, the programs you have. Sometimes they might ask you, like, it depends if, it's more a business person or someone who's interested in financially supporting you. They might ask you a little bit about your budget or what you need money for. Often churches won't ask that right away, but we do have several churches that write us out checks, like especially around Christmas time. And then kind of have in your mind, what do you want? Like, do you have, an event coming up that you need a space for, or is your walk coming up? You don't want to maybe tell them about your walk that's coming up, in 11 months. That's maybe too far away. But what's coming up next that you can ask them? Maybe you can give them 2 free spots for the bus to Victoria or something. And then we talked already about what to bring. We've ordered USB sticks, so that's what I'm lately giving, is USB sticks with our logo imprinted on it and our email, because that's something that possibly they might use all the time and they'll see laying around for a few years. An air freshener is another idea. We do water bottles and different things. Sometimes one thing works for the one pastor or church and something else works for another. Okay, so make sure that you do some follow-up. So you actually need to put this in your calendar if you can, a month later, 2 months later, whatever the situation is. Try to actually mark it down, because you're going to forget. Like I forget too. I met some pastors of the ministerial, and it's like I actually should bring the relationship to the next level and follow it up with an email or do something. So maybe you want to follow up with an email. You don't want to be too pushy. You don't want to, email them every week. You kind of need to sense like how interested. I sometimes start with messaging them on Facebook, and then I might ask, like, would you prefer I reach you on an email or something like that? I have some people that, a church liaison, she doesn't like the email. She rather just texts back and forth. She finds that quicker. So you kind of have to see what works for people. Invite to a friend, an event, a movie night. We talked about that already. Oh, okay. I know why this is taking so long. Okay, so I won't play this movie because it's almost getting time here. So, well, this is not a movie actually. It's a documentary. How many of you, maybe just raise your hand, how many of you have seen The Fifth Estate on Euthanasia? Some of you have, some of you haven't. Okay. So I really love this tool, and this came out a few years ago. And the reason is it's because this documentary was made by CBC. So when I'm showing it in churches, it's not like, it's some crazy religious organization that made this up. It's not like, oh, Marion pro-life, she's so passionate. This is the left-wing CBC who made this documentary, and they're like, you know what, this is going too far. Euthanasia is going too far. So I love showing this because a lot of pastors and people feel kind of safe. And, not everyone trusts the news anymore these days. There's still enough people that kind of, trust the news and think they researched it. So if you want to watch it yourself and you want to educate yourself, just write it down, The Fifth Estate, and then you have to type in, euthanasia or assisted death. And it's an excellent documentary. It talks about how a 26-year-old diabetic man almost got euthanized behind his mom's back. So it's very powerful. It's more powerful than me sharing a story. And stories are very important when you reach people. So you could even send this to a pastor and say, hey, if you ever have time, you could watch this with your wife or, with your church council. And sometimes what they need is they need to see something or hear something, and that'll be the impetus for them to, okay, we need to do something about this. Because often they think like, oh, pro-lifers are exaggerating, or, this happens in, Vancouver or Toronto, like some big cities or something. But, once they hear from this documentary or, from doctors or nurses, they'll realize it's quite prevalent. Okay. Quickly going through this, I won't go through too much detail, but if you get crazy detailed like me, you could have like a cold group of churches and a warm group of churches. This comes from the business or the sales world. So a cold group is, groups, churches you don't know at all, you have no contact with, or maybe you connected with them once, but they don't seem very interested. So you're going to have to kind of build relationship with them differently than the warm group. The warm group is, maybe the pastors come to your walk for 10 years, but that's it. How can you go to the next level? It's kind of like with donors, you want to put them in a funnel. I know this sounds really selfish, and I have to keep telling myself, Marion, you're not trying to gain money for yourself, or, you're not trying to gain stuff for yourself. You're doing it for the babies and for the elderly, but you kind of have to, people in the warm group, if you can take them to the next step. So they do one level of support. Maybe now, they can, we have churches now that take 2 or 3 tables at our dinner. First just the pastor came and his wife, and now they reserve 3 tables at our dinner. They buy 3 tables, and so our dinners fill up a lot more faster. Okay, easy way in. I talked about this a little bit already. Maybe giving free children's books that are really neutral, like Before You Were Born, or there's a book about the elderly, Now One Foot, Now the Other. I mean, everybody would have this book, whether you're, atheist or religious. Maybe offer some free books or ask for space rental. Friends on Facebook, ask them to do a service project. Then they don't have to commit, because sometimes it's a little scary if they actually go to your event. Because the biggest thing for pastors is they're scared about getting fired. They don't want, church members to get mad at them and like, oh, how come you invited this organization? They're scared about getting in trouble. So try to, you have to build trust. Befriend a churchgoer. We had that somebody became a church liaison. She came to one thing, then she invited me to do a presentation, then she CC'd me with the youth pastor, then I went with them, and it just kind of built from there. Okay, are there any questions right now yet? Just a couple of more slides, I believe, I hope. Don't take no for an answer. Now that's easy for me. I've been doing this only 12 years. Some of you have been doing this 40 or 50 years. So, if you're tired, I get it. but in my experience, don't take no for an answer. I mean, like, don't start fighting with them. But I asked somebody to join our board some years ago, and they said no to me. And then a year later, somebody else on the board asked this exact same person, and they said yes. So sometimes it's how you ask, when you ask, you know, what season of their life they're in. Maybe it was my personality, you know, maybe I wasn't being clear enough or nice enough. So just be patient. And if, you know, one pastor says no, try another pastor. Or maybe they don't want to come to the March for Life. They want to, you know, maybe they'll have one brochure from you, or try a different avenue or a different angle. Or maybe you talk in a school to a teacher and he attends that church and he'll talk to the pastor for you. So sometimes you have to try different angles. Okay, maintenance plan. I think I kind of talked about this already, but you're never done. Just remember, retention is the most efficient. It's the hardest getting new churches on board sometimes. So if you have a pastor that's a strong relationship, make sure you communicate with them a couple of times during the year so they don't kind of forget about you. You want to be top of mind, because otherwise other organizations will come in, you know, which are great organizations too, but they'll get all excited about them and they'll start, you know, donating money to them or volunteering with them or whatever. So try to, you can retain the people, the churches you have. Ask for their feedback. You can learn a lot from pastors. They have a lot of leadership experience. You know, maybe they're like, they might have ideas for you. Have you ever thought about doing this? Or maybe, you know, you can do a presentation on that. Or, you know, maybe they'll have some ideas for you. Maybe they think like you should change, you know, your organizational name. You don't have to listen to them, but maybe it's like, you know, maybe they have some suggestions. So I talked about all connecting in different ways. I actually did a training with the church. Maybe I said that already. We've given shout outs in our newsletter. So like say we've given a shout out to the Knights of Columbus. We give shout outs to like volunteers from churches. So they see their own name in your newsletter. It kind of builds relationship. Sanctity of Life Sunday is another good way. We gave a little clip this year from Focus on the Family. So churches in general trust Focus on the Family. So we give a Focus on the Family clip and they're like, oh, they'll open that. And, you know, they think they're not too crazy. And so maybe that's something they might show in their church. Oh, and pastor's lunch is another thing. You can invite pastors to a lunch. It's another thing you can do. Okay, church liaison. Hopefully I'm almost done here. Does anybody need to go? Because I'm going a little bit over here. Are you guys all good? Okay, well, I'm just going to keep going. If you need to leave, then I guess just go off, or hopefully Monica will stop me. So church liaison, ideally you would have 2 church liaisons in each church. So we currently have 1 liaison for some churches, and I just started working rather than volunteering in September. And so my goal is 2, because some liaisons are aging out. And so I don't want to lose that whole church. So I'm trying to get, you know, a younger liaison on board. So if one of the liaisons is sick, or one of them is too scared to make phone calls, or one of them, you know, doesn't like this or that, then at least you have the other one to rely on as well. So I'd say try to get 2 church liaisons. You need to try to get them excited, maybe share some stories, do an office tour. We have a 1-page document. If you want it, I can send it to you. You know, with upcoming events, things that they can do. I myself in my church was the liaison for a while. And what I did was I called all the members of our church and I got 70 new members to join Chilliwack Pro-Life. So we have another church now, another Dutch Reformed church, and they're also willing to do a membership. What did I call it? I called it a membership. I don't know what the second word was, but membership blitz. So they call everybody and hopefully we can get a whole influx of new membership, because before you know it, you know, people have moved and people age out and your membership list goes down. Church liaison tea. I know some organizations do that once a year. A church liaison newsletter. I made my first one this year. Try to have some fun facts, some encouragement. I try to highlight some church liaisons and that gives them ideas. Like I'll say, like, you know, thank you so much for inviting me to do this, or thank you for the church liaison who donated, you know, 100 care packages. because it puts a seed in other people's minds, like, oh, that's something we can do. Give them a free seat at the dinner. The same with pastors. Start out with giving them free seats. And then you can have a list of what they can do. Maybe they can volunteer for you. I don't know. Hang up posters in their church, something like that. Okay, an office tour. This would be a separate, if you guys are more interested in the office tours, I can do a whole presentation on this. We started office tours about a year and a half ago. So it's usually a small group between 10 and 20 people. And this is the invitation in the middle. We try to have some snacks. One of the first times we went all out and we had this fancy charcuterie, as you can see on the one side of my screen. Sometimes we have ice cream bars. You know, we changed it up a little bit, and then we invite people. And a lot of people have never, ever seen our office in 45 years. Plus, we've moved a few times. So I find, and you can decide if you're going to do an ask and have a donation box, or maybe, you know, a lot of them are supportive already, and you're like, this time I'm not going to ask anything. I'm going to give them a break. But, you know, you'll probably get a check the next week or the next month. Very likely. So office tours are a great tour. Sanctity of Life Sunday, I talked to you about that already. We sent out this clip from Focus on the Family. Okay, I'm not going to show that. Pastor's Luncheon. You can do a short PowerPoint or have a pastor promote your organization. Prize draws, that kind of thing. You can have a little resource list for pastors. So we've been handing out On Assisted Suicide, that kind of greenish grayish book there in the middle, by Stephanie Gray Connors. So she has a lot of stories. I think she has 10 points or so that she puts in there. And they'll give pastors some food for thought on what's happening with assisted suicide. You guys maybe know Stephanie Gray. She's from Carol Gray, if any of you know Carol Gray, and she used to work for CCBR. Another one I love to give out because it's a thinner booklet. It has like 10 pages or so. And I think that's on the right here, but I can't see it. It's called Healing Conversation, or Conversations, Abortions and the Church. It's from Pregnancy Care Canada, and it gives the pastor some tips about how to talk about abortion. Lately, the last year or so, we've been giving out the book of Karen Kingsbury, because I find if I go to a pastor's lunch or a ministerial and we have books laying there, a lot of pastors are, I don't know if this is a fair word, but they don't have energy to go read a book. But something like Karen Kingsbury, it's like a light read. Now, probably, you know, a male pastor wouldn't read that, but if there's some ladies in the crowd, you can do some Facebook giveaways. This is a Karen Kingsbury, you know, it's a novel, it's fiction, and abortion is woven throughout the book. So you still get your point across and you get people excited without, you know, preaching to them with a heavy book. There's a new book out by Jonathan Van Maren, A Guide to Our Anti-Christian Culture. I haven't read it all the way yet, but I'd recommend that. Focus on the family stuff. Okay, well, we ran out of time, but I would say today or tomorrow, maybe you want to write down your goals and say, you know, I'm going to visit this many churches. I'm going to start with this church on this day. You know, I'm going to email them, or I'm going to visit them, or, you know, I'm going to offer them this and that. Maybe spend 5 minutes to make a little plan and start with an easy church if you can. Don't start with, like, you know, the most liberal church in town. Try to start with the most conservative church in town, maybe with somebody you know a little bit already. You know, maybe, you know, your neighbor goes to a church, you start through them or something. So try to take a few moments to do that. So if you want to do homework, and if any of you are on the next Zoom call in a couple months, maybe we'll have a couple minutes to see how this went. If you had a chance to, you know, connect with a new church, maybe you can share your experiences. You can call or email me. And, you know, I might sound all passionate now, but I am intimidated too. I give up as well. I need to get encouragement all the time. So, yeah. So that's some homework. And at this point, do you guys have any questions or suggestions? Like, maybe I can learn something from you. Okay. Sorry, if you hear the banging, it's my daughter jumping around here. She came out of bed.
So I have a question.
Go ahead.
Oh, I have one question.
Yes.
So I'm looking at doing a show film, Made, The Dark Side of Compassion. How
Okay.
good is it?
I have not watched that. Made the Dark Side of Compassion?
Yes.
No, who is that from? Or
Rebel News, right?
Rebel News, yeah.
oh yeah, I did watch a little. I think I did watch some pieces of it. I don't know if I've watched the whole thing, but you know what? I haven't watched it lately to tell you enough. Your question was how good is it?
Yep.
Yeah. I love Rebel News. I can't comment right now on how, what kind of language they use, like if it's, too strong or not strong enough, or I'm not quite sure. Maybe somebody else can comment on that. Have you guys watched Made, The Dark Side of Compassion? Does anybody else know or want to help them out? Colburn, one of my problems is that I look at too much stuff. I read too much stuff and I watch too much stuff, and I kind of, I don't know exactly. Monica, have you watched that one? Could you comment?
I believe I have. Again, I'm the same. We've watched a lot of stuff, and I can't quite remember whether that was the title, but it was kind of an expose, wasn't it? Of it was almost like don't follow Canada to any other country that's thinking of bringing in euthanasia. So yeah, all these things are worth watching because they educate yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So Dawn, I don't know, maybe watch it yourself or watch it with your team or something. You could also get, like a friend to watch it and see what they think, because I know as a president, like it takes so much time to review all these things and to, and then you have your opinion, but it's like, how will they perceive it? You're super pro-life, but wow, how will other people perceive it? So maybe have a few people preview it for you and maybe they can give you some feedback. I'm sorry I can't be more helpful.
Okay, thanks.
And there's also a big range of opinions. Like I do presentations where people are, come on, you need to say, use the word killing and murder and, call it what it is. And then there's some churches where, I'm a bit more careful because I don't want to get kicked out, and I want to be, I've gone into a class where there was grandparents of the student who was thinking of euthanasia. And so I want to be kind of careful with my language. So it kind of depends on what church you're showing it to and how pro-life they are. And if the bigger the group, the more diverse. If it's a small little group with 10, 20 people, maybe they think more similarly. But if it's a huge group, then there's going to be so many different opinions. I don't know. Any other questions or comments?
Okay.
Well, have a good night.
Is our time up then? Yeah.
Well, we can, if some people want to stay and keep chatting, we can just keep chatting about other things. Or if everyone's tired and wants to go to bed, then
I think we'll probably keep in mind, if you have further question, you can always get in touch with Marion, I'm sure.
I put it on the screen. My phone number is there. I'm really easygoing. You can text me. I don't do as well with calling. Like you can call me, but sometimes the problem is, I've 4 teenagers. They fight. And I have 2 younger kids who get into trouble too. So sometimes it's better to text me first or to email me, but I'm available. You can call me, email me, text me, whatever. Facebook friend me.
Okay. Yeah. I'd just like to remind you that we will be sending out to all the groups the recorded presentation. It would be lovely if all the groups had been on for this presentation, but everybody was not represented, unfortunately. But it would have been very worthwhile, I think, for them to hear what you said, Marion. And I would like to thank you very much for what you've done tonight.
Okay.
And so I think this is worthwhile keeping, and also the PowerPoint presentation, they can get that, right? Yeah, they can get that if they wish to have it. Yeah. But for the recorded presentation, the audio part will be sent out. Yeah. Okay. So anything else, Marion?
Yeah, I'd like to ask one question. Would you guys like to join a Facebook group? So say if, Shirley Bosman has a question like, what was the name of this movie? Then, I don't know, Don John can reply back and say, oh, you need to, this is the name and you get it by going to so and so. Like, you just, if we need, so we can help each other, give each other advice. Would anybody want to join a Facebook group, or maybe Monica has to send out an email about that? No, Donald, you say no?
Is
I'm
it
not on
possible?
Facebook.
Yeah, is it possible to have the old-fashioned list of emails? I don't think it's an invasion of privacy, but because you can answer us or not, and we won't give it out to other people. But if I wanted to ask a question, just as you did, you listed your email address down there. I think it was. No,
yeah.
no. What is that? That's not an email. Yeah, it is,
Marion,
right?
yeah,
Marion
Marion
at
at
Cherish.
cherishproject.ca.
Right. Okay. I mean, I could ask a question more easily by email than I could by Facebook, and I
Okay.
don't.
Okay, it's just that you don't get answers from as many people. So if you email me, you only get an answer from me.
I understand your point. Good point. Yeah, and I
But
need to come kicking and screaming into the new world. I know.
But yeah, maybe this is not the right group to want Facebook, so that's
Yeah.
fine.
But that's okay. We'll share our ideas now that we're formed up. It's great,
Yeah, yeah.
And thank you, Marion, for your time, because with your children and your family and your youth, it's a good example to we who get jaded and tired and
Yeah.
worn out. So
Well-
we appreciate that very much.
Yeah, well, it's fair, I'm sure you're sometimes frustrated. Where are all the people in the world? Where are all the younger people? And does
Yes.
anybody care? So I get it.
Yeah, for sure.
Also, sorry, Monica, I should say one more thing. I know a lot of you can't afford it maybe, but there's a Heartbeat International Conference in April sometime in Kentucky. So a lot of you guys probably can't afford to fly out there, but you can do it online and join online. It's still fairly expensive, but in case then they have like hundreds of seminars that you can learn from. Very excellent. I went last year to Utah and it's excellent. The Heartbeat International Conference.
Again, is that something that maybe Monica could just get the details and send out to us in an email?
Yeah.
You can. Yep. Okay. All right. So is this a good night?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm done.